I represent the 6th District of Washington State and have the honor of chairing the New Dems. The New Dems is a group of now 104 forward-looking House Democrats, and we're here today to introduce and speak about our ambitious and actionable policy agenda to combat climate change. There's no denying it. Climate change is real, and Congress has a moral obligation to act on it. This is personal to me. This doesn't just involve protecting our environment, it also involves protecting our economic interests and our national security. And I'm proud that the New Dems is playing a lead role in developing a comprehensive strategy to address this extraordinary crisis. As I mentioned, for me this is personal. Where I'm from, we have 4 coastal tribes that as we stand here today are in the process of trying to move to higher ground because of rising sea levels and increasingly severe coastal hazards. Our shellfish industries and our fisheries are really taking on the chin as a consequence of changing ocean chemistry that harms our marine life and the industries that depend on it. Catastrophic wildfires have threatened the health and safety of communities throughout the Pacific Northwest, and even the Department of Defense identifies climate change as a threat multiplier that makes our world less safe. We need to act now, and if we're going to make progress in addressing this global threat, it's going to take action. And I'm proud that the New Democrat Coalition is announcing its intention to do that. The New Dems Coalition's principles for U.S. climate policy outline a bold and ambitious roadmap for combating the climate crisis. And the 12 bills we're endorsing today represent the first step of a legislative agenda to meet those goals. And I'll let my colleagues get into some of the specifics of our proposal, but I'm proud that our coalition has committed to 4 main goals. First, achieving economy-wide net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. Second, fostering adaptation and resilience through robust investments in risk mitigation, disaster relief, and nature-based infrastructure. Third, resolving existing inequities and putting frontline communities first to ensure all Americans have the opportunity to adapt and succeed. And fourth, supporting growth for U.S. workers by ensuring that the climate-forward economy creates good, family-sustaining jobs with strong labor standards. The formation of the New Democrat Coalition's Climate Change Task Force this Congress and the agreement by more than 100 members on this ambitious set of priorities and bills aimed at addressing the climate challenge is a critical first step toward achievable, durable, long-lasting change. And with that, I'd like to kick it over to someone who's been a real leader on these issues in our Congress and in our coalition, the New Democrat Coalition's Vice Chair, Scott Peters.
Thanks, Derek. And I want to thank Derek Kilmer for his leadership and for the great work done by the New Dem Climate Change Task Force, all the members who participated. We've heard a lot about the diagnosis of the problem, and I think that we're beyond talking about whether the climate is changing, whether it's driven by human activity. We know that's true. We also know what the symptoms are, whether it's hurricanes, fires, floods in my district, sea level rise, more intense wildfires, continued drought and water supply issues. And today we're talking a little bit about the next step. We're taking the next step. We're talking about the treatment for this illness. And that's what New Dems are doing today. We're advancing answers to this crisis by endorsing principles, but also actionable legislation. Combating climate change requires global action and U.S. leadership. It requires transitioning to a climate-forward economy, and it requires investing in communities' resilience and relief. And the New Dem effort does just that. 12 of the 12 bills, 7 are bipartisan. These are things that actually might get passed in this Congress and in the Senate. Today there's a very important activist on Capitol Hill, Greta Thunberg. She says, quote, "Please save your praise, we don't want it." She said, "Don't invite us here just to tell us how inspiring we are without actually doing anything about it because it doesn't lead to anything." I'm proud of the New Dems for stepping up and doing something about this. Climate activists like Greta and young folks across the country are calling on us to do this and to do more. The climate crisis won't be solved with speeches or rhetoric. It's going to take legislation like what we're endorsing today, and so I'm happy to be here. This is an important time. There's no time to spare. Let's get to work. With that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague and task force co-chair, Don Beyer.
I'd like to thank Scott and Derek both for their leadership. Congress has been working for years on powerful, proven policy solutions. The Obama administration made policy changes that put this country on a path to adopt clean energy, We have to get there faster, and Trump has done much to undo the progress that we've made. The New Dems are working to build a House coalition with support from both parties whenever possible to pass bills that will restore American leadership on this issue on climate. Our goal is to erect economy-wide, market-oriented solutions and pro-climate incentives for business to make the shift we need to stop the climate crisis. We support policies that push the markets in the right direction and help spur the clean energy transition. We also want to increase research and accelerate adoption of technologies that will help us address climate change. A key component of this package for New Dems is that there are enormous opportunities here for this country to create jobs in a clean energy economy. While we're putting forth some of the nuts and bolts of climate policies that are ready to go today, we're also working on long-term climate policies that comprehensively address the big picture. We need to send strong price signals, and that should include putting a price on carbon and clear emission standards and reduction targets. It's important that we really push to make this shift as quickly as we can because many American communities are already getting badly hurt by climate change. We have good decarbonization and clean energy technologies, but they need to be more widely adopted, and the federal government has to step up and lead when it comes to the research and development needed to drive the shift in the private sector. The New Democrat Coalition has endorsed several bills to set energy standards and advance new technologies. And the proposals we endorse today don't immediately solve the climate crisis, but they take us forward to a time when the need for progress is urgent. For years in the minority, we could only talk about act on climate. Now, today, we're acting. I'd like to turn it over to my climate crisis co-chair, a trained physicist, engineer, ship captain, engineer Elaine Luria.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today to talk about this important initiative from the New Dems. The United States must be a responsible part of the international community and should act as a global leader by advancing climate change solutions that strengthen our economy and our national security. I saw the world during my 20 years in the Navy, and no nation, state, or person is immune to the growing impacts of climate change. Climate change presents a clear threat to our national security of the United States and of its allies. What we are doing now is irresponsible. The United States must work with other industrialized nations to adopt global policies to reduce carbon emissions. The United States also has a vested economic, diplomatic, and national security interest in leading this transition and developing technologies and infrastructure that will defend the climate-forward economy of our future. The nation that develops the technologies of the clean energy revolution will have the opportunity to shape the global economy. Those that fail to meet these challenges will become less economically competitive and increasingly reliant on technologies developed by foreign nations. The U.S., through its powerful economy, our culture of innovation, is best positioned to be a global leader in developing and producing these next generation of technologies. It is clear that we have an indisputable interest in pursuing the global solutions that make not only our country, but all nations more safe. As part of this endorsement, the Coalition has endorsed my Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, a bipartisan bill that would encourage future development of advanced nuclear energy programs. Such programs are poised to create high-quality jobs, strengthen national security, and reduce foreign energy independence and promote emissions-free energy. As an engineer who operated nuclear reactors myself on aircraft carriers, I know that ensuring a thriving civilian nuclear industry is vital not only for our economy, but also for our national security. Nuclear energy must be part of any solution to transitioning to a clean energy future, because nuclear power currently provides 55% of our carbon-free energy. That's why I reached across the aisle to introduce this critical bill, and I'm proud to include it in our efforts today of the New Democratic Coalition and our way forward for cleaner energy. I'd like to turn over now to my colleague and co-chair, Sean Casten.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you, Derek and Scott, for leading this. The New Dems, I think, are uniquely positioned to understand and address the climate crisis because this, at core, is an economic opportunity. You cannot lower CO2 emissions without burning less fossil fuel, and you can't burn less fossil fuel without paying less for fossil fuel. I don't say this as a theoretician, I say this as a practitioner. I spent 20 years building and running clean energy companies. And while it is an economy-wide opportunity, it is also an economy-wide problem that we have to figure out how to solve. And so in order to do that, what we need to do is, number one, have climate policies that are based on climate science, that focus on net zero emissions by 2050, if not sooner, but that don't specify the paths. Markets work when we define goals and allow technology-neutral solutions to emerge from a goal-based policy architecture, and that's what we're doing. We support policies to eliminate existing energy inequities in federal policy and utility regulation, policies to promote energy efficiency, foster business practices that eliminate waste, and policies to promote innovation and clean technology development and deployment, including in efficiency, nuclear energy, natural solutions including agriculture and reforestation, renewable energy, and more. We also must make it easier for our economy to decarbonize by minimizing barriers to the growth of pro-climate businesses. We spend a lot of time talking about incentives. There are a lot of barriers that in many cases are cheaper if politically harder, and we're not going to shy away from those. That will encourage the deployment of pro-climate capital, technologies, and practices by communities, individuals, and the private sector, leveling the playing field by addressing incumbent policies that were designed for old, dirty energy sources. We support increased public investments and policies to reduce or assist with upfront capital, because at core this is a capital deployment problem, not an asset dispatchment problem. And to help state and local governments, individuals, and private entities deploy those technologies. The New Dems have endorsed several bills that address emissions across multiple sectors of our economy and incentivize climate-forward private sector development, deployment, and investment. I now turn things over to my colleague, New Democrat Coalition Climate Change Task Force Chair, Susan Wild.
Good afternoon, everybody. The impact of climate change is already being felt nationwide and disproportionately affects frontline communities. We have to advance climate policies that address the current and future impact of climate change by centering on community needs, ensuring our workers succeed, fostering adaptation, resilience and risk mitigation, and improving disaster response and recovery. A holistic national climate policy has to be developed together with stakeholders to address inequities and create a transition that ensures that all communities benefit in the climate-forward economy. In this transition, we have to ensure that workers all across the United States have the opportunity to succeed in the climate-forward economy through robust investments in workforce development and targeted investment and support for disrupted communities. Millions of Americans are already employed in the clean energy and energy efficiency fields. We must expand on this growth by incentivizing climate-forward industries to develop and build domestically, and by ensuring that these are quality jobs with sustainable wages. Mitigation and economy-wide climate change policies will also create job opportunities through significant infrastructure investment. As existing industries transform, requiring workers to further develop new skills and more workers transition to decarbonization technology and resource industries, it is essential that we ensure the growth in the climate-forward economy creates good, family-sustaining jobs with strong labor standards. I'd like to now turn things over to Jim Sylvan of the Utility Workers of America and Fred Krupp, President and CEO of the Environmental Defense Fund.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So first of all, thank you to all the New Dems coalition and for all the work and the hard work they put in on the task force. As utility workers, we've always looked at the climate change to make it a priority of ours, our top, and to train and prepare those workers for this new industry and seize growth opportunity in things like carbon capture, offshore wind, clean energy standards, and energy storage. I will tell you that labor has to be at the forefront of it. Labor and environmentalists to make sure that workers are not left behind in this change, and making sure that those who are currently in the industry are not forgotten, that transition doesn't mean translucent, that you look through them, to make sure that when we go to our core principles, to make sure that we provide for our communities, that workers' ideals and their principles are put forth, to make sure that the carbon capture and the new technology are in the forefront of our industry today. And many of things, ideals like the bipartisan support from the IPCC on carbon capture and technology that creates communities and families and workplaces that support many high-skilled jobs today in the energy, industrial, and manufacturing construction across this country. For workers are hurting and workers need help, but they see the climate issue on the crisis from today from the East Coast to the West Coast. They want to make sure that they're a part of it, to make sure that they're not forgotten and that skills are set forth and industries. We need to move forward on them and make sure that workers have highly skilled jobs with high paying jobs so that they can support their communities moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, New Dems, for taking such a strong stand on the climate crisis. This diverse coalition of business-oriented lawmakers represents all parts of the country. They're pro-business, they're pro-market, and they're pro-getting things done, including reaching across the aisle to build bipartisan momentum. The New Dems understand that the path to a net zero, 100% clean economy has never been more clear, and their approach to solving the climate crisis is simple. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. The world's leading scientists are telling us that we have until mid-century to dramatically reduce carbon pollution. Young people are demanding action. Americans are demanding action, and poll after poll shows that climate change is now a top-tier issue. There are encouraging initiatives by government, by mayors, and even by corporate America, but alone they don't add up to enough. We need urgent action by Congress to establish a nationwide, long-term pathway that ensures we cut emissions at the scale and pace that science demands. The work of the New Dems is welcome. We want to see more lawmakers follow their example. The bills endorsed by the new Democratic coalition today are a strong step towards 100% clean future, and it's another sign that momentum is building right here on Capitol Hill. Thank you.